2024 has gifted us with lots and lots of movies. Some great, and some less than good. And I mean, just look at the highest grossing movies in the box office this year. Wait, hold on a second. Why are they all sequels? So seeing as 2024 has finally ended, you guys already know what time it is. I'm gonna be reviewing every major movie I watched in 2024, starting with the month of In January, I watched Argyle, which in my opinion was absolute doggy poop. I was expecting a fun little spy movie with Henry Cavill as the main lead because, well, this dude is literally front and center on the poster. But nope, Henry Cavill is no joke, only in this movie for 5 minutes and barely has any screen time. It would have been pretty okay as well had this movie have been any good, but my god, this is the most convoluted and boring movie ever. 2 out of 10, moving on. For February, I watched the one and only Madam Web. At this point, I honestly don't believe that Sony is trying at all with any of their Sonyverse movies. The only reason people still watch these anyway is because of how absolutely god-awful they are. So yeah, big surprise. This movie plays out like it was written by a 5-year-old on Fent. The dialogue and story is so bad, it feels like it was made out of irony and not an actual effort to be anything other than irony. I actually found myself laughing out loud at how ironically sounding some of these lines were.
And when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
For the love of Jesus, avoid this movie at all costs. 1.5 out of 10. For March, I watched Dune Part 2, Megamind 2, and Kung Fu Panda 4. First off is Dune 2, which might just be the best movie of this year, period. Everything about this movie is amazing, from the world building to the gripping storyline to the cinematography. Holy shit, man, the cinematography looks so ethereal. Watching this movie in an IMAX theater has me ascending to heaven. This movie was also so much better compared to the first Dune. It had a lot more action in it, which is kinda expected, I guess, because this is what the first Dune was all leading up to. Paul Atreides in this movie is so badass. Like, this dude got so much aura. Overall, if you like Star Wars and you also like Game of Thrones, watch Dune 1 and then watch this movie. 9 out of 10. Good job. Anyways, moving on to Megamind 2. Jesus Christ, they absolutely massacred him. Guys, listen. This is not what I meant when I said I wanted a Megamind sequel. I just find it so criminally depressing that DreamWorks and Universal didn't respect Megamind this much to a point where they reduced him to a laughable half-assed sequel. If you could even call this a sequel, you could already tell that everything was going to be a cheap downgrade from the start, just from the fact that this isn't a theatrical release. There is honestly no reason to watch this movie. Just watch the first one and pretend this or the TV show doesn't exist. 1.5 out of 10. Next is Kung Fu Panda 4, which might just also be the biggest disappointment of this year. I am still not over the fact that Puss in Boots 2 was made with such tender love and care put into the animation and story, and then DreamWorks just follows that up with this mess of a movie that genuinely feels AI generated. It's not even that this movie is bad by all means. The plot is pretty entertaining at the start, and it still does feel kind of like a Kung Fu Panda movie. It just missed its potential by a lot, and that may be attributed to the fact that something is missing in this movie. I wonder what that is. But yeah, this just doesn't feel as grand and as well put together as the other Kung Fu Panda films, definitely being the weakest. These movies used to make me feel something, man. This one just feels unsatisfying. It's so sad. 6.5 out of 10. In April, I watched Monkey Man and Challengers. First, we got Monkey Man. Now, this movie was peak action. It's basically this movie that takes place in India, centering around this guy taking revenge on a corrupt leader for killing his mother. And honestly, it is really good. This film filled a John Wick-sized hole inside of my heart. It's also no surprise that aside from Dev Patel, Jordan Peele also produced this film. These guys are just the goats, man. What could I say? My only complaint here is that halfway through the movie, the pacing kind of dips and it builds up for the next act for way too long. I just wanted more action in this movie, but all in all, still very quality. 7.5 out of 10. Up next is Challengers. This is a movie I never really thought I would ever watch because I know nothing about tennis, but my god, this is the most thrilling movie I've ever seen this year. This movie basically revolves around these 3 people who are all good at tennis and at the same time all extremely good looking. And I guess since Zendaya was probably the most expensive actor to hire, the whole movie is carried by just these 3 guys and their complicated love triangle. There's a lot of character exposition to be had with this movie because all of these guys are kind of just mentally insane. And also this is like the freakiest and gayest movie I've ever seen at the same time. But honestly, it's still such a captivating movie and I was locked in the whole time. 7.5 out of 10. In May of this year, I saw The Fall Guy and the Garfield movie. Starting off with The Fall Guy, I think this may just be the most hit or miss movie I've ever seen. The concept itself is pretty cool as it highlights the effort that stunt actors put into their job, but I can't even lie, Ryan Gosling could not bring me to liking this movie as much. It's basically just a generic action movie with generic action scenes. The plot is very predictable, but in all honesty, this was still a pretty fun movie. It's also nothing egregious, it's just mid, I guess. 6 out of 10. Next up is the Garfield movie. Unsurprisingly, this movie felt like slop. I had very little expectations coming to watch Garfield of all movies. I know that Garfield as a character is kind of basic enough to begin with and is therefore quite hard to adapt into any movie worth watching. And this movie also proves itself to be the most mundane experience ever. I am convinced that Chris Pratt has genuinely no acting range whatsoever because Garfield in this movie just sounds like, you guessed it, Chris Pratt. The other actors for the other characters were alright, I guess. I don't really like how this movie decided to add so many stupid and unentertaining characters. This movie could have been such a great adaptation of the comics. Like, why did they have to add a stupid ass villain from Madagascar? 3 out of 10. During the month of June, I watched Bad Boys Ride or Die, Inside Out 2, and A Quiet Place Day 1. First off is Bad Boys. I saw this movie without knowing that this was already part of an existing franchise that's been going on for very long, and I gotta say, it was just okay. The action scenes are by far the greatest part of this whole thing. At one point, they literally go full on first person, and this scene blew my feeble mind. The way they shoot a lot of the scenes in this movie is also very creative, and I applaud them for that. Although the general storyline they got going on through this movie is pretty basic, and at the end of the day, I'll probably forget everything that happened. It's still a fun, harmless buddy cop action movie. 6.5 out of 10. Next on the list is Inside Out 2, which might just be the most overhyped movie of 2024. I had people telling me this movie was like the second coming of Christ, and so I watched it, and it was good, but not exactly anything amazing. One thing I'm quite happy for is that Pixar's standards still remain unchanged all throughout, and you could tell that they genuinely wanted to tell a good story here. The new emotions were also pretty interesting, even though they never got as much screen time as the big five. All in all, I'm honestly just a bit pissed that this unnecessary sequel made this much money, and also the fact that I am the biggest Disney hater. But yeah, the movie is okay. It definitely did not tarnish the Inside Out franchise or anything, so 7 out of 10. Moving on to A Quiet Place Day 1. Now, I vividly remember seeing this in a theater and actually thinking the premise was very interesting. Not that this is anything new or anything, but seeing how the Quiet Place universe started out was definitely the highlight of this movie. I also just really love these characters. It's quite refreshing to see a horror movie where the main leads actually know how to survive and aren't just stupid. But yeah, this movie does feel really satisfying to watch from start to end, and I 100% enjoyed it. 7.5 out of 10. But first, sponsor time! You, watching this video right now, just like me, are a completely real life person. Or so, I hope. This is why this video was sponsored by Raycon E25 Everyday Earbuds. For your daily life, earbuds like these are an essential addition to have. With their ergonomic design, they fit snugly in your ear. Immerse yourself with high quality sounds like never before. Perfect for going on morning runs like this. I wear Raycons to the gym and work out while listening to my favorite tunes. Help! I need a spot! Oh, sorry. Can't hear you. Did you know that Raycon E25 earbuds have active noise isolating at half the price of other premium brands? And as a busy guy who likes to do a lot of business, Raycon's 32-hour battery life is very important. It also has a built-in mic, which is perfect for answering calls from very important people. Oh look, I'm getting one right now. What's up, boss? Yeah, just adding some finishing touches. So what are you waiting for? Get rid of those pesky wired earphones and go to buyraycon.com/Chaze to get up to 20% off of everyday earbuds. Sponsor, end. During July, I watched Despicable Me 4 and Deadpool and Wolverine. First off is Despicable Me 4. This movie is hot garbage. Yeah, I feel like ever since Minions Rise of Gru, Illumination kinda just stopped trying with this franchise, and it definitely shows in this movie. Everything just seems so half-assed and nothing really even feels real in this movie. The writing all feels really disconnected, and this movie kinda fails to recapture what made the older Despicable Me movies so good. One thing I've noticed is that Gru is kind of a wimp in this movie, even though in the previous ones he was perceived as a super badass supervillain. And speaking of villains, what the hell even was this cockroach guy? This may just be the worst villain in the entire Minion franchise. 4 out of 10. Next up, we got Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, I do not care what anybody says, this movie is amazing.
Marvel Jesus.
I saw this movie for the first time with a bunch of my friends, and I gotta say, this delivered way more than what was expected. I think I just got used to the fact that current MCU movies are super mid, so to see this movie open up with Deadpool dancing to NSYNC was such a nice breath of fresh air. I honestly forgot what it was like to watch a good Marvel movie, and for once this year I was finally able to re-experience that feeling. This also being the very first R-rated MCU movie is pretty cool, because let's be real, you can't have Deadpool and Wolverine without them saying fuck every 2 seconds.
Language.
The whole plot line where they get sent to this purgatory of canned Marvel projects was also really nice, and although from there I will admit it lacks a little bit story-wise, but it more than makes up for it in its humor. The thing I like the most about this movie is that it definitely feels like a comic book. The whole adventure is written so nicely that nothing ever feels out of place, and the action was creatively directed. I also just love Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. Like, these guys are quite literally perfectly casted as Deadpool and Wolverine, and hopefully we get to see more of them. Till they're 90. 7.5 out of 10. During August, I saw Borderlands, and holy shit was it boring. I mean, this movie was my first exposure to Borderlands. Before watching this, I only knew Borderlands as the funny game that was also in Fortnite. But my god, I already know this movie did not do this franchise any justice at all. I'm actually a bit appalled at how they managed to turn this seemingly interesting video game into the most boring movie I've ever seen. There is absolutely zero substance to be had here. Watching this movie felt like watching paint dry, except you're not watching paint dry, you're watching the Walmart version of Guardians of the Galaxy. I absolutely mean this when I say that your time could be better spent watching Madam Web, because at least that movie is funny. This movie makes me very angry because not only are the writing and characters bad, but it feels like a chore to get through. I should be getting paid to watch this movie. 1.5 out of 10. I watched 3 movies in September: Transformers 1, The Substance, and The Wild Robot. Starting off with Transformers 1, which is the most peak Transformers movie, by the way. I went into this movie blind with virtually no knowledge of any Transformers lore, and it was still amazing. The world building and the whole divide between the minor robots and the Transformers robots was really cool, and the whole plot was really reminiscent of a certain Star Wars movie. Revenge of the Sith. And though the plot was still really basic and cliche, it definitely makes up for it with the animation. God damn, is the animation in this movie immaculate. 7 out of 10. Next up is The Substance. This movie is truly something else, man. This is genuinely one of the greatest, most thrilling movies of 2024, while simultaneously being the most traumatizing thing I've ever seen put to a screen. I had to actually take breaks while watching this movie because it got so bad towards the end. But if you could just stomach the absolute gore and nightmare fuel in this movie, it's actually super good. Not only is this film so well edited and shot, but the story itself is very thought-provoking and definitely provides a great point that makes it worth watching. I swear, this movie isn't just mindless gore and body horror, it's just really that good. I guess you could say it had substance. Yeah, anyone? 8 out of 10. And finally, to end off probably the best month in terms of movies for 2024, The Wild Robot. Okay, I completely forgive you, DreamWorks. This is the best animated film I've seen this year. It takes the cake. I completely forgot what it was like to watch something that was just so quality from start to finish, because I do not have a lot of complaints with this movie. Aside from the fact that the robot voice kind of sounds like the TikTok text-to-speech, but I guess that was also kind of the whole point of it. But yeah, this movie slaps. The whole time I was literally on the verge of tears. Like, this movie is genuinely Pixar quality with Puss in Boots level of animation. Go watch this right now. 9 out of 10. During October, I watched Joker 2 and Piece by Piece. So first off is Joker Fully a Doo-Doo. This movie literally gave me a migraine. I have no idea whose idea it was over at DC to give this supposedly standalone movie a sequel, but I would like to have a word with them. In my opinion though, it isn't as bad as what some people say. I can still appreciate the love that was put into this film visually, because I think they nailed the coloring and the look of everything here. It literally looks like eye candy. But other than that, the music adds next to nothing to this already boring movie, and the story itself is also borderline stupid. Lady Gaga is probably the most uninteresting Harley Quinn I've ever seen, and the whole movie was kind of just building up to a really terrible ending. Yeah, this movie sucks. 4 out of 10. Next up, we got Piece by Piece, which might just be the greatest Lego film to ever exist. As a fan of Pharrell and all the other artists included in this movie, I enjoyed this so much. It's less of a standard Lego movie and more of a biography on the whole history of Pharrell Williams. But yeah, I loved absolutely everything from the storytelling to the music to the visuals. I feel like this movie would not have been this cool had it not been made through the medium of Lego bricks. Apparently this movie did not do too well though, because the marketing for this movie was absolutely abysmal. But I still recommend this movie if you're looking for a casual laid back watch and you're also into rap music. Like, look at this, they literally got a Lego Kendrick Lamar in this movie.
Reincarnated.
7.5 out of 10. For the month of November, I saw Red 1, Gladiator 2, and Wicked. Starting this month off is Red 1, which is at the very least entertaining. And that's basically it. I honestly can't take any movie with a Rock in it very seriously because this guy just has absolutely zero range with any of the characters he plays. If anything, the only actor here worth seeing would be J.K. Simmons, but they gave this guy like no joke 15 minutes of screen time, which was very disappointing. As for the movie itself, it's not nearly as bad as I thought it would be, but it's also quite literally the equivalent of a Christmas movie with MCU clips. 5 out of 10. Next up, we got Gladiator 2. If I'm gonna be honest, this movie did not have to exist at all. I mean, what better way to expand an already existing franchise only 24 years after its predecessor release? Yeah, this whole thing was basically just Gladiator 1, but worse. The whole plot and story structure is basically just reused from the first movie with not really too much things changed. The big set pieces and epic battles are pretty cool and immersive though. This is also most likely the only reason why anyone would have went out to watch this movie, which I did for sure. But other than that, this was pretty okay. Very fun watch and I was definitely entertained. Extra point because Paul Mescal is hot as hell in this movie. 6.5 out of 10. Lastly is Wicked, which unironically went so goddamn hard. I feel like having this movie in movie form rather than musical Broadway form actually kinda elevates it because that last scene made the whole movie for me. In terms of the story itself, I would say it's pretty average. This is basically just the Joker but Wizard of Oz themed. A lot of the time is spent on musical numbers and the plot only really ramps up within the last hour. But yeah, if you're only interested in the story, I wouldn't really recommend this movie, especially with that runtime. I will give it props. The songs are very good and without them, I don't think I would really have enjoyed this movie all that much. Just the fact too that they sang every song in this movie live is so cool. It was like seeing an actual musical. Ariana Grande is also surprisingly a good actor here. So overall, aside from the movie looking like it wasn't color graded at all, Gravity was definitely defied. 8 out of 10. For December, I saw Sonic 3 and Wallace & Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. First is Sonic 3, which is absolutely the best Sonic movie in the franchise so far. It had been a while since I watched any of the Sonic movies, so I was a little skeptical at first, but that third act solidified this as peak Sonic. It's also worth noting that the last hour of this movie has like the coolest action ever. Keanu as Shadow was so damn perfect, but I mean, who cares about any of these guys, right? Jim freaking Carrey made this movie. The little backstory with Shadow and how he was raised by Dr. Robotnik's grandfather went so hard as well. Like for some reason this movie has some really serious moments while also having the goofiest humor I've ever seen. The whole thing was just really entertaining from start to finish and I honestly can't wait for Sonic 4. 7.5 out of 10. And lastly, we got Wallace & Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. This was one of the movies I was very excited to watch this year, mostly coming from the fact that it's a Wallace & Gromit movie, which is quite rare coming from Aardman. But I also find it cool that Aardman is having a resurgence with their classic movies, with Chicken Run 2 releasing last year and now this. The main conflict in this movie is about AI, which I think is absolutely perfect for a modern Wallace & Gromit movie. To make a statement about the dangers of AI in today's society using the medium of stop motion animation, which is the kind of animation AI could probably never recreate due to its complexity and handcraftedness, really sold me on this one. The big bad guy Feathers McGraw also made his first reappearance in 30 years, which is also pretty cool to see. And the overall consistency and quality of Wallace & Gromit still definitely applies to this movie. 7.5 out of 10. Now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Chaze Awards 2024. Let's go. Out of all the movies I saw in 2024, here are my personal top 5. Number 5, Challengers. Number 4, The Substance. Number 3, Wicked. Number 2, The Wild Robot. And finally, the award for the best movie of 2024 goes to Dune Part 2. Good job, well deserved. And up next to give the award for the worst movie of 2024, drum roll please, Borderlands. Yep, this movie is so bad I'm putting it lower than Megamind 2. Please kindly chill yourself. And with that, another year has come and gone. If I had to describe 2024's wide selection of movies in one word, it would be sequel. Seriously, most of the movies off this list are sequels to already existing movies and franchises, and normally I like me a good sequel, but let's be real, a lot of these were hot ass. But hey, I mean, 2024 was still a phenomenal year in terms of movies, so I think we should just be grateful. And now that this absolute filler year is over, we can focus on the future. 2025 is gonna be massive in terms of content. And speaking of content, Spider-Verse 3 is finally coming out this year, which means I can finally make that Sony ranking.